To one of our premier startup events in Startup Week 2.0, and David and his crew are responsible for Startup Week 1.0, and it's even bigger and better than it was last year. So we've had a great week so far, and we'll continue to have that. And David came here despite having to fly through Tijuana and Minnesota and some places like that. He'll share that story with you. So we're delighted to have them back and to share some good stories with you. And we want you to ask some really tough questions of them to see how they can handle it. So I'll turn this over and let some formal introductions be done. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you all for coming.
I'll take that. Good. Hey, thank you everyone for coming out to this segment of Startup Week. I'm very grateful to have some representatives of Weebly. Before we begin, I'd like to turn the time over to our Startup Week team. They have some announcements to make, and from there I'll introduce our presenters, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Okay, we ask that you turn off or silence your cell phones. Because we are filming this, so don't want to disrupt the film. We also are taking questions via Poll Everywhere. If you text your question, or it says it on the screen, so you can just look at that, but you text IST Startup and your question to 37607. You can also ask your question via Twitter if you just use the hashtag IST Startup. And you're going to be, there's going to be someone going around taking pictures, and obviously it's being filmed, so if you don't want to be in the pictures, go to the back of the room, or you can just come up and see me afterwards. And yeah, that's pretty much it, so I'll turn it over to the Weebly guys.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to introduce to you today the top management team of Weebly. I'm sure many of you know the company. I'll provide a little bit of background information about Weebly and about each of our presenters. What you see before us is our three successful entrepreneurs who have a story to tell, but mainly they're here to answer questions. Let me say a few words about Weebly. Weebly is a tech startup based in San Francisco, California. California tends to be a hotbed for technology innovation and startup companies, and it happens to be one of the great places to be, and that's where Weebly is headquartered. Weebly is a simple yet powerful way for anybody to create a website. And in fact, more than 15 million people have created websites using Weebly up to this point. I've read that every month an impressive 12% of the US population visits a website created using the Weebly platform. That is quite impressive. We have today to interact with us David Racinko. He is the CEO and co-founder of Weebly, and he's back to speak with us for a second year in a row. He's a 2007 graduate of IST at Penn State, and he's the youngest recipient of the prestigious Penn State Alumni Achievement Award, which he won back in 2010. Next, and Dave, he's on your far left. We have in the middle Chris Fanini. Chris is the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, and co-founder of Weebly. He's also a 2012 Penn State IST graduate. He grew up in Penn State and started a variety of other businesses, including a web hosting company, before co-founding Weebly. He's also an avid snowboarder, angel investor, real estate investor, and is on the verge of earning his pilot's license. Did you fly the team here today?
I did, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep.
As practice? All right. And then next to Chris is Dan Veltri. Dan is Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Weebly, where he has made many contributions to the company. Dan was also awarded the Penn State Alumni Association Alumni Achievement Award in 2012. He is a 2007 graduate of the Smeal College of Business at Penn State. Please, let's give them a warm round of applause for having come so far.
Well, thank you guys. It's great to be back here. One little known, you guys might not realize that Weebly was actually started as part of a 440W class. So the class you're in right now is a class I was in 2006 when we started Weebly. So I think the goal is really just, we told the story last year, and you might be familiar with it. So the goal really is just to open up to questions. And I think we've collected some questions, and we definitely want to take some questions from the audience. Anything anything you're thinking on, kind of how we started the company or the story or anything like that.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a question and answer session. And I have a list of questions that have already been submitted by students from IST and faculty. And then we have, what's her name? Lindsay is here up front taking questions via social media, and she will periodically raise her hand. If you don't mind, though, before we get right into Q&A, would you mind telling us a bit about the story of Weebly, where the idea came from, and kind of the early little background information about the company?
Sure. So as part of the IST 440W class with Dr. Santoro, the goal was to create a web app. And at the time, one thing I noticed was that friends of mine were having a really hard time creating e-portfolio. So the goal, when you graduate, was to somehow showcase the work you've done, showcase the things you've learned in school, and that was just really, really hard. You had to use front page and upload it via SFTP. It was just a really complicated process. What's interesting is that's essentially the same problem that a whole lot of people have, and people still have that problem today, and it's still a problem that we're focused on tackling. So the early idea was start as part of this 440W class, work throughout that semester, work throughout the summer with Dan. So I was interning in New York City for Merrill Lynch, Chris was interning for MTV, and Dan was interning for GE in Connecticut. So we worked throughout that summer. Really throughout all of 2006 was just working, building the product and getting it to a place where it was better than anything else that was out there. That fall, we applied to Y Combinator with about a day left on the deadline. Just read about it at the last minute and applied. We rented a car here from State College, drove up to Boston. Funny story, the car actually, the alarm didn't work. So as we're driving down College Ave, the car alarm starts going off, and we're like, what the hell is going on? And so we drove it back to Enterprise. The guy wouldn't believe us that the car was busted until after arguing with him for about 5 minutes, the alarm went off right in front of him. So we drove up to Boston, applied to YC for the winter 2007 program, got accepted into YC in November 2006, moved out to San Francisco in January 2007. That's really when we started working on Weebly full-time. Y Combinator, we raised $20,000 from Y Combinator. That lasted us that's about 4 months of living in San Francisco for the three of us. So went through the Y Combinator program. In April 2007, we raised an angel round, $650K, that lasted us a couple years. And then at that point, the need was very clearly proven, and we just need to continue to improve the product because honestly, at the time, it wasn't good enough. Throughout, Weebly kept growing, it kept getting better. We, probably around April 2007, had about 200,000 users. Next big milestone is between December 2008, January 2009, we became cash flow positive as a business, and have just continued to grow. Today, Weebly has over 15 million people that have created a site using our service. Every month, roughly 110 million people visit a site created on Weebly. So in the U.S., I think it's even a little more than 12% of the U.S. population every month that visits the site. And what's interesting is it's still the same idea. It's still the same problem, which is people want to showcase their work. They want to, if they're starting a business, they really want to be able to, present themselves in a good light and tell the world about, whatever they're passionate about. And that's still what we're working on doing today, is making that as easy and as intuitive as possible.
So one thing I wanted to touch on, I think it's interesting. When we started Weebly, throughout the whole process, we tried a few other things as well. We actually started two, other companies within Weebly, sort of part of, based on the software along the way. And one of them was it's called Snap Layout, and it was back in the day when MySpace was actually still popular. Before Facebook was sort of gaining traction. and took over eventually. But we tried all these various different things. Weebly was still sort of young in its infancy, and it wasn't necessarily gaining a ton of traction. So we sort of pivoted and we tried this snap layout profile editor built on Weebly technology. From there, we actually built ad optimization software called Snap Ads. So I just thought it was interesting to sort of convey that we tried a few different things along the way, and it's kind of neat that we ended up back sort of at the core, which is with Weebly, and that's sort of what where we are today.
Yeah, one thing I can add to that is that even before Weebly, the three of us, we're entrepreneurial-minded people, but our first attempts at starting companies weren't incredibly successful. Dave started an email security company, and he teamed up with a couple of his friends, in his dorm and friends from school, but that didn't really have the legs to take it very far. And Chris, started an ISP and hosting company, and I had like a social network for students to study abroad. I think the important takeaway there is that it's just important to start something. You learn a lot in the process, and your first attempt at starting a company is most likely not going to be your last attempt, and you're going to learn a lot from that process. So, you don't have to have the perfect everything in the beginning. Just start stuff and see what works and learn from that experience.
Yeah, and just to touch on that too, I mean, starting a company is probably the best thing you can do for your resume. There's literally no downside. So especially when you're in school, just if you have an idea, if you start working on it, the worst case scenario is that you end up with an awesome resume. But I think the most important takeaway is you need to start working on it. So it's not enough to talk about it. It's not enough to write a business plan or think about getting incorporated or anything like that. What you really want to do is just, the only thing that really matters is getting started building the product. Create something that's really cool. Create something that's better than anything else out there. And then try to launch it and see what happens. And sometimes it takes off, and sometimes it doesn't scale up like you wanted. But at the end of the day, you gain that experience, and that's absolutely invaluable.
Do you have any questions from the audience? Okay. Let me ask you, may I ask you,
I was wondering if you guys have any looking forward to mobile and touchscreen. If you're kind of considering that, how people are going to be creating websites with obviously drag and drop through touching and other.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, are we considering mobile, phones and touchscreens and tablets? The answer is absolutely. We now have Weebly today for iPhone that works really, really well. It's a 5-star rated app. About 10% of our usage comes from the iPhone app right now, and that's growing tremendously. And our view is that a site is more than just a website. It's more than just something that you might access from your computer or from your laptop. It's something that you need everywhere. And so all of our sites today work really, really well on tablets and phones. They're a very adapted experience, not just for on your laptop, but all of our sites work on our phones. As far as I know, we're the largest provider of mobile websites on the internet, the largest single provider. But to us, a mobile site, a website, it's kind of the same thing. It's really the same need. They're not two unique different things. And we are absolutely very, very focused on making sure that the experience of creating a site is amazing across all of your mobile devices, as well as the experience of accessing a site works really, really well across all your mobile devices.
yes.
Yes, I have a question pertaining to 440W. Something related to it. So when you have an idea that you feel will be innovative to the current market, but you don't have the technical know-how to bring to life, how would you move forward? And whether that be pitching the idea to a company, partnering with individuals who know how to develop it. So essentially, which would be the better decision, business decision for me to do?
Sure. So the question is, if you have a really good idea but you don't have the technical know-how to build it yourself, how do you move forward? And I think the answer is in the beginning of a technology startup, the technology is, the technology side is the most important. To phrase it another way, the question could be, well, I'm interested in starting a law firm, but I don't know anything about law. So, obviously, if you're going to start a law firm, the very first thing you need is some really smart lawyers to be involved, and it's the same thing with a technology company. So basically, that would leave you two choices: either learn the technology, or team up with someone that really does know how to build the product. But the thing I would really say is later on in a business's lifetime, like if you're Johnson & Johnson and you have these established products in the market and you need people to sort of supervise the ongoing operations of that business. There's a lot of room for someone that isn't directly involved with the manufacturing of those products that can still help. Early on in a technology company, the people who are the most valuable are the people that are building the product, because without them there is no company. So the best thing to do really would be to dive in and learn the technology. There's a lot of really great resources now to learn to program that weren't available 5 years ago. It's something that a lot of people are working on, making that as easy as possible to learn. The second answer would be, find someone who does, but you're going to have to prove to them your value. Show them how you could help the company, because they're going to be the one building, the nuts and bolts, the programming side. And so you really need to go above and beyond and show how you can add value too.
Yeah, I'll just add that a couple resources that might be helpful. There's a site called Code Academy, which does help you learn how to program. There's a lot of resources that are free to start out to build on their platform. Like Parse is a great platform for building on mobile. Heroku is a good platform for building for web apps. So, there's a low barrier to entry to get started in terms of cost, and you can practice those skill sets for free. Oh, and a good news source is news.ycombinator.com. It's just startup-related news and resources, and it's a whole community of people that are trying to build products. So, just getting involved in that conversation, and even just not even participating, just reading is very helpful.
I have a question as well that was submitted to me. Each of you plays a significant role in the company, and it's often said that in startups you wear many hats. One of you is CEO, one CTO, one is CPO. Would each of you mind just for a minute describing the role you play in the company and what that's like and how you think you contribute to its success?
Sure. So absolutely. I mean, wearing many hats, and it's a job that evolves, I think, too. And in the early days, the titles don't really matter much. CEO was meaningless. There's three of us. It was Chris and I just coding all day, all night. I think our schedule was we'd work until about 8 a.m. And then just sleep and wake up and keep working. For probably for about the first year that we were working on Weebly, just nonstop programming. And interspersed in there a little bit of investor relations, going and pitching and raising around, all that stuff. Over time, my job evolved into more of a VP engineering type thing, managing the engineering team as well as doing a lot of the roles and responsibilities a CEO normally does. And now it's probably more like you think of your typical CEO role, which is setting direction for the company, doing external relations, investor relations, as well as still being in touch with the engineering team and making sure that the ship's running smoothly.
Yeah, so as Dave mentioned, when we started, it was a little bit of everything, right? I mean, we wore many hats, and I remember there were times where Dan kind of spearheaded the customer support operation. We needed people to answer support questions. We needed to keep customers happy, and there were times when we were all answering support requests. We were all just really involved in trying to figure out what people like, what they didn't like, all involved in just shaping the product and trying to figure out what we're going to build next and what the features are going to be like. And then as we grew, we sort of went to these separate roles, and what I do mostly now is as CTO is I'm in charge of all the infrastructure and operations. So it's a role that sort of evolved as the company grew and as our footprint and our data center grew, and as we had more users and we had more bandwidth and just more servers and all these various things. So that's sort of how kind of how my role has evolved, and now it's more sort of management and less hands-on, sort of building a team that can support, the company for the next 100 million users, 200 million users.
Yeah, so the early days were really fun. It was just us three living in a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. We had a view of Alcatraz, but it was kind of a small, beat-up apartment. But it was a great place to work, and we all wore many hats. I wasn't as involved in coding, but I did know HTML and CSS, and over the years, I've gotten very familiar with our technologies and can speak pretty fluently on that. But I focused on number one, customer support was very important to us, and for the first 2.5, 3 years of the company, I was pretty much the sole person answering most support requests, and I grew out that team. I was also, involved with strategy and external BD and product decisions and kind of everything else you might think is involved in a company other than coding. But like these guys said, over time the role does evolve. One of the earlier things that I let someone else focus on was the customer support angle. And now we have a distributed team of remote support reps. It's about 35 people, and they all work from home and answer all the questions that are asked. And it's managed by a team in our office. And then I segmented finance off to our VP of Finance. And today my title is Chief Product Officer, which might sound a little unusual, but product is of supreme importance to our company because the product is what most matters to the end user, and it's what drives our growth because our growth primarily comes through word of mouth. And so it's got such supreme importance that I thought I would change my title from like CFO to CPO. And what that really means is that my day-to-day is creating the wireframes for how new features are going to be built, working with the engineers and the designers to build those features according to how we're thinking about building them. And it's a little bit kind of like the oil in the engine to keep things moving along.
Dan, tell them about the website that you found our first support reps on. Okay, yeah. So at one point, I had way too many support requests to handle. And I was browsing Google for something. I don't know how, I can't remember exactly how I saw it, but it was a Google ad on the side, and it said, it was called hiremymom.com. And I was like, what is this about? And you can hire qualified work-from-home moms to support your business. So I looked into it, and it was totally legitimate. Like, these are former, people that have run call centers and, people that used to work in government and all this stuff. So I put out kind of our requirements, and our first 2 reps were stay-at-home moms. And we kind of continued that trend until today, and it's worked out really well for us.
What type of challenges have you experienced scaling your business, and how did you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, scaling the business, that is a really good question because there are a lot of challenges that you go through. I mean, there's the technical scaling challenges, and I think Chris could really speak to that on how you build a product that, how you build an infrastructure that 110 million people every single month access. But in building the business, there's also different stages in scaling the business. So if you include our support team, the company is currently about 70 people, and there's just different stages you go through. Early on, again, it's just the 3 of us in an apartment, and that's really easy. And then once you get to about 10 people, then you start to define your roles a little bit more. So that's where even when it's just 5 or 6 people, roles and titles don't really matter at all. It's just everyone's just cranking away, and it's obviously completely flat, and it's really easy to just focus on work and output. And once you get to 10 people, then you start to get a little bit more defined roles. As you move up into 20 and 30, I think the next big step that gets challenging is establishing your first layer hierarchy. So up to maybe 15 or maybe even 20 people, you can be completely flat organization. There's no management basically, besides the 3 founders. But once you scale up a little bit higher, then you have to start including, so one of our first hires was VP engineering, and I think that was, one of the best hires, one of the hardest and the best hires we've ever made. And Darian is just stellar at his job, doing a much better job than I was of managing the engineering team. but I think that's the next level, and then it's actually a question that I've asked a lot of people. As you continue to scale up the company, so we're 35 in the office right now, 70 including our remote support team. As you get to 60, 70, 100 in the office, what are the next things that break down? And I think really the next one is that everyone doesn't know everyone else's name. And I think, at some point you hit that maybe around 100, 120 people if you're doing your job right. And it just feels different. So, I mean, it's, right now everyone knows everyone and we hang out a lot and we know what's going on. But, I think the first time you walk in the office and you're like, who's that person? I don't even know who they are. That's a weird point. So I think, what we're pretty focused on is just trying to keep the team tight-knit, and keep the culture really strong. But as you grow the company, there are kind of constantly sort of new hurdles that you hit that are just they're not necessarily better or worse. They're just something that you kind of have to jump over.
So, and just to touch on that, I think I can speak for David and Dan with this, but early on, I think the hardest thing is sort of just pulling away. I mean, this is a company that we all started. It's sort of our baby, right? And being able to sort of let go of certain things as you scale up the sort of the roles in the company and the hierarchy has been really tough. I know for me personally, it's hard. I was always the guy with root access to all the servers. I knew where everything was set up. I knew how all the fiber was interconnected. I knew, all the switch configurations, everything. And sort of giving away the keys to the castle for that aspect of it on the infrastructure side was really difficult early on. And again, it's all about sort of hiring the right people and really, really keeping being able to have and trust people, and it's really all about the right people.
Yeah, the thing I would add is in the early days, one of the toughest things is choosing who you're going to work with, and for us, we have complementary skill sets. We kind of have abilities that complement each other. So, that's very helpful in the early days because you kind of wear all hats and things are able to get done. But those early hires are also extremely critical because it's defining your culture is partly how you define it as a company, like from top down as management, but it's truly defined by the people that you hire. So you want to be very rigorous in terms of the people that you choose. Make sure they have the same values as you. Make sure they're committed to the company and the vision. And some of our early hires have been so critical that it's defined the company and defined our culture, and so we try to maintain that. But rigorous hiring is definitely a challenge and hard to scale well.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. I mean, I think there's only two truly hard problems in starting a technology startup. Everything else is sort of like next order, not actually that difficult when you actually try it. Like getting incorporated, I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, oh, I don't even know how to find, like, how am I going to find an office, right? I've never rented an office before, or how am I going to get incorporated? And you think those things are hard. They're actually really, really easy. You just go to someone, you're like, get me incorporated, and they do it. And it's really easy. But I think there's really only two hard things in starting a startup. The first one's getting product market fit. What that means is basically you want to have a solution to a problem that a lot of people have. So you want to find a problem that, and it's really easy actually, as you're just going about your day-to-day life, just think of all the annoyances and all the frustrations that you're experiencing in your life. And those are problems that, maybe other people have those too. But building the right product that solves a problem for a lot of people, it's actually very, very difficult to do that. So that's one of the hard problems. And the second hard problem is hiring the right people. That's also extremely challenging because it's not as straightforward. It's not like fixing a bug. It's very nuanced, and finding and hiring the right people, I think, those are the two hard problems. Everything else in comparison is extremely simple.
One thing I want to add to the product market fit is that a lot of companies are started with the idea of being completely secret and stealth. But one of the most important things to do is to get feedback from your peers and from real users. The chances of someone that you show the product to actually going and building a company for the next X number of years are extremely small. It's most important to understand if you have product market fit by showing it to real people. Critical. So yeah, that's one common mistake.
Yeah, everyone has ideas. It's really all about execution. So that's super important.
And I mean, the thing about ideas is that, you know, we're all sort of machines in like in a fairly similar environment, and we're all getting the same inputs. And so I think the reason that you see ideas tend to like emerge at the same time, that multiple people have them, is just, you know, we're all getting relatively similar inputs, and so we're kind of thinking through that, and we come up with these ideas. So, you know, maybe if you're starting, yeah, you know, if you've come up with a new